Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jamie Allen, Secretary General, Asian Corporate Governance Association, Ms. Stephanie CHEUNG, Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer, Melco Resorts and Entertainment Limited, and Ms. Edith Shi, Executive Director and Company Secretary, CK Hutchison Holdings Limited. Ms. Alison Choi, Senior Legal Counsel, Kerry Holdings Limited, who is also a member of the in-house Lawyers Committee, will moderate this section. I shall hand over the section to Alison.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, Joanna. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alison Choi. I'm very honored to be the moderator for this panel. We have a very interesting topic today, which is, should GC be given a seat at the boardroom table? This is something which I've always wondered myself, so I'm really excited to hear from our esteemed panelists. We have Edith and Stephanie here with us today, who are very seasoned lawyers leading their respective legal teams in CK Hutchison for Edith and Melco for Stephanie. Both of them have sat and participated in numerous board meetings in different capacities, who will have a wealth of experience to share with us. So I very much look forward to hearing from you both. And we have Jamie, who's a strong advocate and expert in corporate governance, who also has had countless interactions with board directors. So I very much look forward from hearing your insight as well. Before we kickstart, I would like to highlight that a lawyer can in fact take seat at the boardroom table wearing different hats, be it as a legal advisor on an ad hoc basis, or participating as a company secretary, or in fact, joining the board meeting as an actual director. Depending on the hat worn, it would also entail the lawyer playing a different role. This session will take form of a more casual conversational style panel discussions. We will talk about the appetite for including GC at the boardroom, the advantages as well as the disadvantages. We will discuss about how to be a valuable addition at the boardroom table. Last but not least, of course, we would be inviting our panelists to share some practical tips throughout our discussions, and we would end with a Q&A session. So let's start with Edith. Can you please explain the difference in roles for a lawyer or the GC joining the board as a legal advisor, a company secretary, or a director, please?
Thank you, Alison, for the question. I'm very happy to do so. But before I do that, I'd like to just say a couple words of thanks to the Law Society. Can we have the first slide, please? This information has been given to me by the Law Society. Let's look at the reason why we're looking at GC's legal counsel today is because there is a growing number of lawyers that are working in-house. Currently, there is about 13,000 members of the Law Society, 11,000 of whom would be holding practicing certificates. 70% are in private practice and about 30% in-house. Now, when I first started being the general counsel of my company, that was like 30 years ago. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary next year. I don't think there were many legal teams in-house then. But I'm really very pleased to see this information. 30% of the members are practicing in-house. And I really wish to thank the Law Society because I remember complaining to CM a number of years ago that the Law Society doesn't look after in-house lawyers. Thank you. All right, I will answer the question now. The three characters that we were talking about, general counsels would be attending board meetings at the invitation of the board for specific agenda items. This could be to explain a transaction or to delineate documentation that the board needs to consider. They don't attend as a rule, and they are not at liberty to speak unless invited. They don't have any voting rights. Let's look at company secretaries. They are in attendance at board meetings to facilitate proceedings, such as taking minutes or providing guidance in terms of listing rules compliance. The company secretary would be attending the board meeting from beginning to the end, other than specific conflicted items, such as considering the company secretary's salaries, or the directors are in private sessions, they want to talk privately. Company secretaries are allowed to speak where appropriate, but they have no voting rights. Directors attend board meetings throughout to deliberate on matters on the agenda. They have the right to speak as well as the right to vote. The General Counsel's involvement with board proceedings depends very much on the corporate culture and board sentiments as to risk management and compliance. Is there any value added by the General Counsel? And the General Counsel's access and status at the board meeting has to be earned. It doesn't happen automatically. I'm very fortunate that my company has a very strong risk management and compliance culture. Without the signing off of the General Counsel, no documents get signed. That's all I have to share for now. Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you, Ida, for the interesting statistics and your sharing, which is very well explained. So, Stephanie, I understand that you have actually worn all three hats in different companies in your company group. So what has your experience been like wearing the different hats, and how involved were you depending on the capacity you held when attending the meeting?
Yes, so I think, first of all, the important thing is to understand that each company has its own culture and its own business needs. How lawyers can add value to the board process also depends on how immersed the particular lawyer is with daily management of business and working hand in hand with the management team. For a lawyer or for a team that's been involved with a company's affairs, for example, we find that we get involved in HR, we get involved in transaction execution, financing matters, advising on minority shareholders' right, related party transaction, which means that you really have a chance to add value to the board. So as company secretary for a listed company, I focus a lot on things like technology, introducing latest technology in terms of how do you put together a board book efficiently, which is paperless and environmentally friendly, getting vote in a most efficient way. And that also helped in the board process when everyone walks in with an iPad, other than, like a 6-inch pack that we used to do. And I think that's one way. There are other ways. I think a lot of lawyers are very involved in the ESG movement these days. On the ESA, environmental might be more difficult, but on really within the job scope of some of the lawyers working in-house. And I find that on the governance side, there is certainly a lot of contribution that could be had. Lawyers a lot of time are charged with drafting.
师的责任呢，就是要常
And with that, we're able to help having key messages being given from the top and really take a lead role in terms of guiding the board in building good governance practices. That's been my experience.
Thank you, Stephanie. I couldn't agree with you more about the importance of role of lawyers playing in corporate governance. On this note, moving on to Jamie, how would you describe the appetite for including a lawyer or the GC in the boardroom in Hong Kong as a director? And how would you describe the readiness to include a lawyer or the GC in the boardroom in other APAC jurisdictions when compared with Hong Kong?
Thanks very much. I think it's quite similar in the rest of Asia as it is in Hong Kong, and that's that there isn't a huge appetite for including the General Counsel in the board. Edith can speak a lot more detail about Hong Kong, and I'm sure she'd agree with that statement. There is an appetite to include accountants, for example, because you are required to have at least one person on your audit committee who has accounting and financial management expertise, but you don't have quite the same rules around lawyers. So clearly a lot of companies are looking for accountants on their boards, particularly as independent directors. You do see companies around Asia bringing lawyers onto boards as independent directors, but they are out from outside the company. So I think there's clearly an appetite there, but not so much getting the in-house general counsel onto the boards.
Thank you. Edith, and what do you think are the underlying reasons for that?
Well, Jamie is absolutely correct. Accountants are needed and not so much lawyers. I have some statistics to share with you. Can I have slide 2, please? This is taken from Board Monitor 2022, compiled by Heydrich and Struggles, is an executive search firm. While this is coming up, I will start. This is about 2021. Last year, there were 66 directors, new directors appointed. And back in 2020, there were only 42. Why was there such an increase? First of all, there is a search for hiring female directors. As we all know, gender diversity is a big topic now. And on top of that, INET's appointment to be beefed up within a period. If you don't do it properly, then companies will be in breach of listing rules. So there was an increase of appointment last year. Let's look at the next slide as to the experience of these appointees. CEO 17%, CFO 14%, COO 5%, Deputy CEO 5%, and other C-level 8%. Other C-level, you don't know what they are. The CLO, Chief Legal Officer, is not there. The General Counsel is not there as a separate category, but they might be embedded in one of these. And then let's look at the experience. The next slide, please. These new directors have. 50% is in financial risk and compliance. International business, 14, sustainability, 11, social media and digital, 6, cybersecurity, 5, D&I, 2. I actually had to look up D&I. It's diversity and inclusivity. So, General Counsel, where could they sort of slip their way in? They could be the first type, compliance. They could be the second type, having international legal experience. They could be doing sustainability work, as well as diversity and inclusivity work. So although they are not on the list as the popular appointees, there is a way for General Counsel to find their way in. Let's look at, I don't have any more slides, but I have additional information to provide. I got an intern this summer, and Kathy, thank you very much for doing the work, to go through the 69 HSI Hang Seng Index stock companies as to whether there are any INETs that are general counsel. Now, the finding is, Jamie already alluded to that, there were 10 companies with INETs that are lawyers, but they are not general counsel. They are external lawyers that might be advising corporates. There are 4 companies with directors that do general counsel work, but not at that particular company level. They could be a director from another company, albeit not related. If they're related, they become NEDs and not INEDs. And out of the 69 HSI stock companies, I only found 2 that would fit the bill. Executive director plus, and it's not current GC, it's ex-GC. One of them is myself. Another one is from a PLC company. But you see Stephanie here. There are other non-HSI index companies that would fit the bill. I don't have the opportunity to go through them, but I think that would be a pretty good exercise to run, maybe for your organization. Okay, so we can see that it's not common, for, unless we have been able to go through the rest of the listed companies, not common for executive directors to be general counsel of the company at the same time. We can tell that legal is not the focus, it's the accountants that are the treasurer. But there is an increasing focus on general counsel if this general counsel is possibly also a company secretary or a governance professional or a sustainability expert. Jamie would have told us that in the US and Canada, normally the general counsel takes the position of the company secretary as well, but they don't become board directors. So more and more legally qualified person are getting trained in these other areas, company secretaries, sustainability experts, environmentalists, governance experts. So general counsel can expand their remit. It all depends on what you're prepared to do to make yourself more marketable. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing such interesting information and statistics with us. I must say I'm very surprised and a bit disappointed by how uncommon it is for GCs to have a board directorship role. Stephanie, what's your thoughts on this? Do you see that lawyers actually have an edge to be in the boardroom? What are the benefits for having a lawyer as an actual director participating on the board level?
Yeah, I think industry dependent. Certain industries are heavily regulated. And those industries would probably find it very helpful for someone on the board who understand the perimeters within which that they need to operate in a regulated environment. So obviously our company is the casino gaming industry, so we have to navigate those quite closely. I would imagine, I don't know, but mining and a few other industries as well, oil and gas. And then also the situation where if a company has very militant minority shareholders, that's a situation where I think having a lawyer on board would, who can engage in fast thinking during board proceeding, can really help to maintain harmony of board proceeding. Otherwise, the board process can be rather disrupt. But also there are other situations where company structure is a little bit more fluid, where lawyers work very closely with management and operation, and just by sheer exposure to day-to-day management, that particular lawyer have acquired other management skills. So there's kind of a bit of a blurring of line as to whether you're a lawyer or you're part of executive. So there are senior lawyers who sit on executive committee, etc., that participate in daily decision making. So again, someone with that background would be beneficial. But I think echoing, I guess, what both Jamie and Edith have said, statistics tell us that not a lot of lawyers are on board. And I think most people would think that lawyers are way too risk averse, right? And we're taught at law school to analyze situation and be super conservative. So I think if lawyers want to get more involved in board, we just need to change our mindset. We need to really retrain the way we think and we analyze and we look at risk assessment and look at problem solving to be more business-minded.
Yeah. These are very, very good points and food for thoughts for all fellow lawyers here, joining on Zoom as well as physically. And
could I respond to what
yes.
Stephanie is saying? I think the issue of risk averseness is a real one. Our experience in engaging with in-house counsel in different companies, for example, partner organizations or hotels, is, of course, they are trained lawyers, so they take a very legalistic approach to things. And when you're trying to sign a contract or an agreement, quite often they will be very risk averse. They want to, protect their company, of course. So sometimes they will make sort of demands of the other side that are, extremely unreasonable or impractical, or just reflect a lack of understanding of what is the purpose of the sort of the alliance, the collaboration that you're trying to achieve. We had an experience where we were trying to sign an agreement with a partner, and their in-house counsel was putting in clauses that, were absolutely not implementable. And they were claiming ownership over certain things like company data, which wasn't our company data, wasn't their company data, it was public company data, which, they didn't own, the public companies owned it. But they were putting in these clauses that if we hadn't shown a lot of flexibility on our part, the agreement simply wouldn't have gone through. So I think having a really good understanding of, the sort of the business of your company, what they're trying to achieve when they're signing a joint venture or some sort of partnership agreement is really critical. And I think that's one of the reasons why GCs are not on boards, because they do take a sort of too narrow an approach to their work. So.
I think if I get a chance to advise law school in setting the curriculum, is they need to teach lawyer to be real-life business person, as opposed just to a really traditional way of looking at issues. Yeah.
And Jamie, would you also think that being a governance expert per se would help to have an edge for lawyers?
Yes, I think it certainly helps, because the whole governance environment, as everyone knows, has changed quite dramatically over the last 10, 20 years. And it's not, doing business today isn't just about deciding what you want to do and working with partners and selling to customers. You're having to deal with pesky minority shareholders, or you're having to do with other stakeholder groups, whether they're environmental or social groups. So there's a wide range of governance issues that you do need to understand. And coming back to the sustainability point, one idea I would throw out there is that, the big issue today is climate change. And if you look at the way climate change is described, it's usually put into physical risks and transition risks. The physical risks we all know are floods, fires, natural catastrophes. The transition risks, a lot of those are policy, regulatory, legal in nature. So if you're an in-house counsel and you have a really good understanding of how transition risks are going to affect your company over the next 5, 10, 15 years, then I think you can be invaluable to your board. So.
Great, thanks for the tips. Now that we have a good picture of the roles of the roles which a GC can play in the boardroom and the advantages and the disadvantages, what I would like to explore is how to be a valuable addition in the boardroom. After all, as Edith, Stephanie, and Jamie, all of them have rightly pointed out, we as lawyers should be adding value. if we do not add value, people would question whether there's a need or any benefits to give GC a chance to have a boardroom seat. They may advocate that GC should not be given a seat at the boardroom table. So Edith, what advice would you give to in-house lawyers? Previously, you mentioned about being pragmatic and being a problem solver. Would being a company secretary be a good first step to pave the way into the boardroom and to gain a better understanding of the company culture and allowing of the lawyer to provide more value-added service on top of legal knowledge?
Actually, any additional skill set that a general counsel, a lawyer can acquire will always be useful, whether it's company secretary or a sustainability specialist. I became a company secretary not by choice, because the company secretary left for another job within the group, and the CEO looked at me and said, "You are a lawyer, you can be the company secretary, so that's what you are." So when things happen, I think it's important that one grabs the opportunity to learn. Company secretary is a good step into the board, but I am a little bit, I feel a little bit awkward that a general counsel's job is to try to get onto the board. I think understanding how the board operates, whether it's because you are a general counsel and you have that opportunity to go near the board, or you are a company secretary, or you are a sustainability governance expert for the company, it doesn't really matter. I think every step along the way that you are able to build yourself into a better advisor for the company would help. Jamie, I am attending a course on sustainability. It's taking me, I'm only having 3-4 hours sleep every night. So you just have to, it's a continuous life learning experience. And I must say, I understand a lot more. It's very good.
Thank you for sharing with us your personal experience, Edith, which is very thought-provoking and also reminds us all to acquire new knowledge every single day whenever possible. And Stephanie, so can you please share with us some tips to make the first steps to convince the business team or stakeholders in the company to let us go beyond our normal pure legal roles, getting more business exposures, giving more input on different levels?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll do is learn how to speak the language. I have also gone to business school myself, but I can't really read a financial statement, to be honest. You know, not like our CFO or our accountant or our CEO. I think I want to read a financial statement better. But I think going to business school is not a bad idea, right? So there are just different disciplines. There's finance, there's marketing. But that gets you into the mindset of the business team, so you're much closer to the way they think. But I think in your daily interaction with the business people, there are a few things that I would observe. Sharpen the risk management skill, and I don't mean analyzing legal issues. Lawyers oftentimes don't look at the legal education as just a tool. Lawyers, if you look at the bag of tools, have a lot of things in there. You know, the legal education is only one of them. And I would say common sense is very underrated. People don't apply it as often as they should. The other thing is, to be honest, just stay on top of current affairs. You know, read The Economist, read the Financial Times, understanding the topics for the day, and apply all of that in building a solution for the business team. A lot of lawyers I observe would throw out issues and just to say, you want to do that, these are the issues, but they don't really help to build a solution. If you identify the issue and be a leader in solving the problem, then you're much closer to the business people. And people then actually want you to be at the table when they have a problem that they want to figure out. And I think the other thing is the very important thing that we mentioned just now is about the mindset. You know, what kind of mindset do you bring to the table? People got to look at the issue differently, not only from a legal point of view. I think that just about sums it up.
These are fantastic advice. Thank you, Stephanie. Now, taking a step back, we should pay more careful thoughts as to what makes a good board director. Jamie, you have had lots of experience dealing with directors on numerous occasions for different purposes. So please let us know what sort of traits do you normally see would make a lawyer a good director?
I thought you were going to ask me a general question about what makes a good director.
Feel free to go on from the general level as well.
I might just talk about independent directors, actually, because clearly executive directors are on the board because they're competent and they're in charge of a certain function or section. But independent directors, you know, we want to see people who aren't just independent, but really have the business experience, have the knowledge of the industry, of the company, to be able to really add value to the discussion. And clearly, if you're coming in from outside, you don't have the level of knowledge that an executive director has. So you really need to do a lot of homework, spend a lot of time, you know, understanding the company, talking to people within the company, not just the other directors, but, you know, the whole range of senior management, visiting the company sites, talking to shareholders, stakeholders. And I think if you're well prepared as an independent director, then, you know, you do have a fighting chance of saying something sensible in the boardroom. The problem, as Edith, I'm sure, would agree, and Stephanie, is that, you know, you do get independent directors who don't spend a lot of time trying to understand the company. They come into boardrooms. They make genuinely sincere comments, but they may not be all that useful to the management of the company. So really trying to understand the management, trying to understand also their constraints, their, you know, their limitations, their resources, is extremely important, I think. And again, it takes a long time, it takes several years, and quite often one of the frustrations, particularly if you have short-term limits on boards of, say, you know, 3 to 6 years, is that, you know, usually after about 5, 6 years, an independent director is just reaching the peak of their understanding, and then they might get moved off the board. But in some markets it's 6 years, in other markets it's more like 9 years now. But, you know, I think really understanding the challenges management faces is really essential.
Thank you, Jamie. Now, Edith, being an executive director yourself, what are your thoughts on this? What are the characters that you would personally identify as most effective and useful for being a board director?
Any director, for that matter, first and foremost, must act in the best interests of the company and the stakeholders. There is a lot being discussed about whether GCs are suitable and whether we should apologize for being just a lawyer. I don't think so. The lawyer is there for the legal aspect of the expertise. Every director is there for a reason. So you can't expect the lawyer to be an IT expert, to be a banker, to be an accountant at the same time. So expertise in the area for which you are elected to the board, we should always preserve that as a director. Good business acumen. You can know all the accounting rules, you can be an IT expert, but you don't know how to apply that to this business. And your comments would sound very hollow. And as a general counsel, to succeed, we have to get very close to the business. If we don't know how our business is run, we have no place being the general counsel to start with, let alone the company secretary or a board director. I would be looking at, as Jamie pointed out, a director that is interested in your company's business. They don't come here just for the board meeting to go through the 1 hour or 2 hours of meetings and then fall asleep in the middle of it. And then from time to time, when they wake up, they ask a question, just to make sure that that is recorded in the minutes, that they have spoken. And very often, these questions are not relevant. I'm glad I don't have these board members on my boards. So a director that is passionate about the business, that is prepared to collaborate, prepared to spend time on understanding what it is what I would look for.
That's very candid sharing and great advice for all. Indeed, as a lawyer, legal experience and knowledge are given, but as we previously mentioned, common sense and also an actual interest and an active participation are all differentiating characteristics. Let's talk about some useful non-legal experience which we may try to acquire during our career in order to be a better participant in the boardroom. Stephanie, looking back, what sort of non-legal experience do you wish you had which would allow you to be more compelling and effective at board level?
Just given the current environment, I wish I had spent some time doing other things. But my current kind of pet area that I'm interested in is actually cybersecurity and cryptocurrency, which we find that more and more we're coming across. And also for any big companies, the threat to your cybersecurity is so great. And that really intersect with risk management and also legal risk as well. And it segue into crisis management, contingency planning, and all of those things that lawyers are very well equipped to do. And just like Edith, I haven't enrolled in a course, but I've downloaded a whole lot of materials and books that I'm trying to read, but haven't got the time.
And Jamie, being the non-lawyer on our panel, what sort of non-legal experience would you suggest our fellow lawyers to watch out and read up in this current climate?
Well, I used to be a journalist here back in the early days. I was at the South China Morning Post and then the Economist Group. And one thing that often struck me about board directors and when we interview companies is how little they knew about the society outside their company, or how little they knew about what people outside their company actually thought of their company. So I think taking an interest in the wider world, sort of understanding more broadly sort of the political environment in which you operate in different countries, understanding the economies of different countries, understanding the societies, learning a language or going to a sustainability course, but just having a broader, sort of more macro perspective on the places in which you do business, I think can be invaluable. And it always used to surprise me as a journalist when, large corporations would be surprised by environmental groups, criticizing them, when most people outside the company knew this was about to happen, but often the company seemed extremely surprised when it did happen. Or in my current work now as a governance person, you can see shareholders getting upset with the company, and you know that there's going to be a shareholder proposal coming at some point, or some other sort of public criticism. And quite often, again, companies are really taken by surprise. So, interacting with as many people outside your company as possible, I think is really useful.
Great, thank you. Yes, and indeed, it's very important for us all to think and try not to be pigeonholed into being the legal advisor by board members and other business units, and that we are more than that, and we could contribute and participate more than just wearing the legal hat. Now let's think back to our topic, should GCs be given a seat at the boardroom table? And we'd like to invite the audience to contemplate this while we consider some potentially tricky or sensitive situations which a GC may face in the boardroom. I'd like to start with Jamie first. Nowadays, it is common for in-house lawyers to put on their business hat and share the risk of making business decisions. We have previously discussed that sometimes we can't just be holding the business team back, and we cannot just be inhibitors. So, Jamie, how can we balance gatekeeping with appropriate risk-taking, and are there any corporate governance concerns which you would highlight?
Well, I think probably the first thing is to understand the level of risk your company is willing to take, generally and in different areas, so that, you know, as a lawyer, you understand the legal environment, you understand the compliance issues, but, you know, if you also understand your company is willing to take more risk, then I think that, you know, helps you balance your sort of legal advice with sort of, you know, putting on your business hat. In terms of governance issues, I mean, if there are particular, you know, conflicts of interest maybe that your company might be involved in, if it's taking excessive risk, or in fact if it's, you know, potentially doing something illegal, then clearly that's, you know, that's illegal and a governance risk. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
This is an excellent reminder, thank you. Edith, do you have any on-the-ground examples to share how to hold the fort and perform your gatekeeping role without jeopardizing business decisions?
I recall when I was first the general counsel of the company, that was like 30 years ago. In the middle of the night, I would be receiving on my telephone recording system a managing director within the group calling me up, knowing that I'm not there, and accusing me of killing the deal and having to be responsible for it if he doesn't get his bonus for the year. No, that's my interpretation. So as a general counsel, as the legal person or any legal person within the company, if we cannot tell what is black and white and gray, then we don't have a place to sit within the company. Where it is gray, we should try our best to be businesslike and help our colleagues to resolve the issues. But when it is black, it's black. It has to be black. And whether this is you against your CEO or your chairman, I think as a legal counsel, we serve our purpose by pointing out the issues. I would always put it in black and white, and not so much, you know, to protect myself, because, you know, I can be sacked anytime. So that when the decision is being taken at a higher level, at the board level perhaps, that could be taken into consideration. There are reasons that could be acceptable to the company, risks that the company has calculated and is prepared to take. And it is not the legal counsel to stand in the way. And if that's how a legal counsel acts, then he or she would not be adding value to the company. He should do his job by stating what is correct and what is wrong. And the board takes responsibility collectively. So it's not just one person saying yes or no. The most important is we discharge our responsibilities.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more, Edith. Thank you for the excellent reminder. Now I have a tricky question for you, Stephanie. Have you ever...
I have to add.
Yes,
Even when I was scolded on the phone, the deals got done. And I got what I want.
Glad to hear that. Yeah, going back to the tricky question that was gonna pose to Stephanie, which I have not forgotten. So have you ever come across a situation when there's a conflict or disagreement between yourself and the CEO or whoever you report to? And how do you handle this?
Thank goodness, no.
Edith, have you? Maybe Edith could share later after.
No, but you know, I would have different view with country managers a lot. For example, I would say a lot of time conflict arises out of the fact that people are not able to communicate at the same level. So the important thing is to make sure we are not talking at cross purposes. I will test my own point of view with a spectrum of different people across the organization, just to make sure I haven't got anything wrong. if it is a legal issue, then obviously I will test it with my external counsel. It's a different matter if the CEO said he wants to do something which is clearly criminal. That's very different. But on most things, since he's my boss, you know, if we want to pursue a course of action which is highly risky, then it's my job to point out what the risks are. And whether he wants to make that decision is in his ballpark. Once I point out the risk, I've done my job. And if he take a very risky move and the company get into trouble, I need to be there to mop up the mess. So it's fine.
Thank you for your interesting sharing. I'm conscious about the time, but before we move to the Q&A session, I've got one last question maybe I could ask Edith. If you had a chance to do your whole career over again, would you choose a different career instead of being a lawyer, such that maybe you have an easier or quicker access to the boardroom in a different capacity?
Well, first of all, it was never my objective to become a lawyer and then to become a board director. But I am a lawyer, I'm a company secretary, I'm a board director. And if I were to do it all over again, I started not being a lawyer. I started to be a music major, and then I did linguistics, and then I did law. I would do it absolutely in the same way. The ability to see things differently, having a different training, background, I think helps me a lot in understanding other people, understanding the business, and understanding how I should deal with the rest of the world. I would not exchange it for anything else. I'm happy that after 30 years, I still go to work with a happy heart every day.
Great to hear that. Okay, so now let's turn to our audience. For those joining via Zoom, please feel free to raise any questions via the Q&A function. And for those joining us in person, please feel free to raise your hands. Lady in white.
Hi, I'm Vivian, also a member of the In-House Lawyers Committee. Would you be able to share with us whether in jurisdictions like perhaps UK or the States, the culture of a corporate lawyer wearing a business and a legal hat at the same time in the board, whether it's different to Hong Kong? And I guess the second question is whether do you think this trend will change in Hong Kong in the longer term?
Vivian, you started with the premises that Hong Kong is not the same as the UK and US. That's why you asked whether this would change, correct? Anyhow, I'll try to give you some answer. I am director on a number of UK boards. Not so much on US boards. We have very few investments in the US. I think the practice is not different from what we have in Hong Kong. So maybe, and I must emphasize that one size doesn't fit all. I happen to work in a very big company. So there are colleagues that work for smaller companies, smaller geographical coverage. They would have very different experience. But I think at the end of the day, a general counsel, a legal counsel is there to look after legal matters of the company. So whether you are in the UK, in America, in Australia, in Hong Kong, in India, I think our responsibility should be the same. If that helps.
Anything else to add? Okay, we've got a few questions from Zoom. Let's pick one. Okay, the lucky anonymous,
They're all
anonymous attendee. Okay, so is there any conflict of interest for GC and lawyer to be a director of a board at the same time? Say if there's non-compliance. Under duty to the court, does a Hong Kong lawyer have obligations to report that? Maybe Jamie or Stephanie? Jamie on corporate governance, experience sharing, and...
Look, I won't speak to the particular rules in Hong Kong. Maybe Stephanie or Edith can, but you could imagine a situation where if you have a general counsel who's supposed to be sort of overseeing the compliance of the behaviour of the directors, if they're also a director, then potentially they may feel less independent in their ability to be, the general counsel. So if that is the case, then yeah, you could imagine there might be situations where you get conflicts of interest, that the lawyer feels too much of the sort of the group, the club, the committee on the board, and doesn't feel the ability to, play their role as general counsel and provide that independent advice. So it's possible, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think let's differentiate between external lawyer and an in-house GC. As a director, you have fiduciary duty to the board. As senior management, it's the same. So at the board level, you're free to articulate your point of view. So, and the board would discuss and come to a decision. So I see no conflict there. When a firm is an external, when a director is also an external lawyer, I oftentimes find that a bit uncomfortable when I encounter that. An external lawyer comes with a whole sort of other motivation, and then he sits on the board. But having said that, unless he owns share in a different company or in the company that conflict with his duty, and there's a deal that is cross-dealing with him, again, his duty on the board is just like the other director. So, having regard for the professional integrity of lawyers generally is not perceived to be a problem. And certainly in the case of a GC, that's no conflict.
I totally agree with that. Everybody is a professional, so you just have to discharge your duties properly. It doesn't matter whether you are a GC sitting on the board or you are not on the board.
Thank you very much, all. On behalf of the Law Society, I would like to express our gratitude to all of our panelists once again. It was a very lively and engaging discussion, and I personally find it very inspiring and motivating. So thank you, Jamie, Edith, and Stephanie. So should GC be given a seat at the boardroom table? I'm sure each of us have our own stance. But what we hope to have given you, each and every one of you, is some food for thought and maybe some things to work on. Thanks to our audience for your attendance, be it online or physically in person. We hope that you have benefited from our discussions and continue to enjoy the sessions later this afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you again. May I invite our Vice President, Mr. Roden Tong, to present our souvenirs on behalf of the In-House Lawyer Committee.